Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pod Plays. I have the wonderful Sarah here this morning. A very last minute ask of her, so I really appreciate you being here and sharing your story. I'm really, really pumped for this one. I think this is going to be a story that is really going to resonate with a lot of families and provide comfort as well in just that they're not alone, because I think there are so many elements of this journey where people are denying that things are happening in the field or denying that things are happening in this early intervention space when, we're seeing it every day as parents and we're seeing what our kids are going through. And I think you just have such a unique story that needs to be shared. And so I'm really so grateful that you're here. And you have two beautiful kids. You live in the wonderful coastal town of Esperance, and you have two gorgeous kids, Kipp and Fia. Kipp is your deaf boy, and Fia is your little hearing girl. And wow, what a journey you've had. And I've just been so privileged to watch Kipp grow and thrive under your just care and hard advocacy that you just have not stopped. And I'm just so in awe of you. And I think really and I always say this every episode, but I do always think it's best to go back to where it all began. And we really get to learn your journey and Kipp's journey and what that was like for you. So take us back to the moment you found out that your little boy was deaf and how that sort of all unfolded.
Yeah, it was a lengthy process, to say the least. It was complex, and by the times I remember the last audiologist saying, I think he's severe to profound. We need to go ahead and do further testing. Honestly, I was relieved. I was like, oh, I knew it, because we'd just been on 6-month journey of 5 different audiologists and being told he's hearing and you just need to go to speech therapy, you need to keep doing speech therapy. But what was hard was that every audiogram they said, we're not getting reliable responses, we're not getting reliable results, but we think he's hearing, so you should go to speech therapy. And so by the time I'd gone through 5 different audiologists and finally got this senior audiologist at a private practice, and I was booked in for whatever, half-hour consult, and we were in there for an hour and a half, and she was just using every trick in her hat, and she was using instruments, and she didn't give up until she felt her audiogram was at least somewhat reliable. And she said to me, yes, the results I'm getting indicate he's severe to profound. And by this point, I'd been doing speech therapy religiously. I was going every week. I was doing my homework. I was totally committed. Whatever they asked me to do, I did it, and I
Um,
still had a child that wasn't talking. And
yeah, so back at the when you first had the newborn hearing screening, I
yeah,
guess, that experience, what did they tell you when that first happened? Because obviously had this whole journey of being told he was hearing for so long, and I'm assuming being told that Auslan or sign that didn't even come up. So sort of explain to me that journey at the beginning and sort of before you sort of got to the point where you're like, okay, severe to profound, here we are, which I totally get that relief feeling too, because you're like, oh, we have an answer, thank goodness. But yeah, talk us through that newborn hearing screening time and then just, I guess, what you were told and what you were being advised to do. I think that's, something that might be profound to share as well.
yeah, definitely, Claire. So he passed his newborn screen, flying colours, there's no problems. And we did have hearing loss in our family, so I thought there could be something happening. But yeah, he passed and it was all good, and that was the end of it. And then 18 months old, his language and even just babbling and stuff started to just taper off. And at 2 years old, we went to a community health nurse, and she said, oh, he's a boy. Boys talk later than girls. I'm sure there's so many people that have heard that in this space, and it just breaks your heart. So I had a 2-year-old with minimal speech, and she said, look, he's a boy, this is normal, but let's just go and get an audiogram just so you feel better. So I did, and I went and got an audiogram. And yeah, like I said, unreliable, couldn't get consistent results. And so it was a really, like, there was nothing even written on this audiogram. There's like one dot in the 35 decibel spot and then just no other information. And they said, yeah, I think he can hear. He might have some hearing loss, but he has enough hearing to develop speech. And that's where that all just started. And so we went on this speech therapy journey. And
What a call. What a call to just say, well, he can't, like just giving you that information like it was a certainty. I just find that that is what drives me nuts sometimes, is that we're getting this information and they're saying it with such conviction and such certainty that you trust them. Wow.
yeah, so and the other red flag that came up every single appointment was that he was failing his OAE, so his otoacoustic emission. So that's they put the thing in the ear and they test whether the cochlear hairs are doing anything. Essentially, I think that's essentially what it is. 100% of the time failed that test. Oh, we don't really take that into account because it's not 100% accurate. And so there was all these red flags that just kept on cropping up and kept on being ignored. And yeah, 6 months of intensive speech therapy and now living with a child who was language deprived, which was just so traumatic for our whole family and our child.
Talk us through how that was for you and actually having to wake up every day with that and trying to navigate language deprivation. Like, I think this is a really important thing that we need to highlight.
I'm not sure I could ever articulate how awful that time was and how torturous it was for Kipp and for all of us. And I guess that's why I feel that the space you're working in, Claire, is just so critical because I never, ever would want my worst enemy to live through that language deprivation of a child. And it's just, he would waking up every day. I dreaded the days. I didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to be with my child. I felt this guilt that I didn't want to be a mum. I wasn't enjoying this journey, and everyone has these beautiful 2 and 3 year olds, and I was just hating it. And he would just scream this high pitched scream in frustration all day, every day, because he just couldn't communicate his basic needs. And I was screaming and crying too. And I don't know what you need. I don't know what you want. You need to talk to me. And it was just every day was like that. And it was just, I remember when he was about 3, because this was almost a year of, and that language window, that 2 to 3 year old, like their brains are just developing and they're trying to get all this information and they're trying to get out all this information and they can't. And the frustration is phenomenal. And Damien and I said at one point that it was the worst year of our lives. And when you see 2 and 3 year olds and how beautiful and how much fun they are and what a magic time of their life and your life as a family that is, and we didn't have that, and it brought me a lot of anger towards all those professionals that missed red flags, gave poor advice, and sent us on a really long, difficult journey that was unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's harrowing. Like, that's harrowing. And I don't think anyone, that frustration that they felt and just the absolute sense of out of, like, they would have just this out of control feeling he would have felt every day, and just having, and he's such a bright kid. And this is what is so, I guess, powerful about Kipp's story, is that he is thriving now. And we're going to talk about all of that in a second. But like, all of that was in there. All of that was in there, just like bursting and like to come out. And I talked about on socials recently this whole idea of communication jail or language jail. And it was like language deprivation is like these kids, these really brilliant, bright kids are in prison, and they can't communicate, as you said, their basic needs. Their human rights are taken away from them. They just feel like this little shell. And as a ripple effect of that, the parent does as well, because they're being told, focus on the speech, focus on the speech, focus on the speech. And we just see this happen so often. And I really appreciate you sharing that because I know that would have been hard, but I just think that that story needs to be shared more. And I guess from there, obviously, what was the advice around, because you obviously started signing when you found Auslan, but what was the advice prior to that? And then the journey into finding Auslan and Australian Sign Language and what that was like.
Yeah, that's a journey. Yeah. So we got to a point where obviously everyone's just saying he's not deaf and you just need to teach him to talk. Um, and I remember one night after that, I'd got them kids to bed, and I said to Damien, whatever is going on, he can't communicate. I don't know what's going on. If he's not deaf, if they're telling us he's not deaf, something else is going on and stopping him from communicating. So let's just start learning Auslan and see if he can pick that up. And so, obviously, like so many people, we just downloaded a few apps and we didn't know there was different dialects. So we would just scroll through, oh, I like that sign. Let's learn that sign. And we just started, you know, food, hungry, toilet, all the basics. We just tried to teach him so he could communicate his basic needs. And that was all we started out doing. And he was picking them up and he was starting to communicate with us through these simple signs. And at the same time, we're getting advice from speech pathologists to withhold things until he asks for them. And I hold so much shame around some of the things that I did in that time, like, yeah, not giving him food because he didn't ask for it. And it's like sending him to daycare because maybe he wasn't talking because he was spending too much time with us. So they told me to send him to daycare. And you can imagine how that went. He was just so traumatized. Like, where am I? Why is mum leaving me here? I cannot communicate with anyone. Oh, it was just, I have so many regrets. And like, yeah, I do hold a lot of anger around the professionals that gave that advice and that we had to go through that. But yeah, and a lot of shame about me as a mother and how did I not know that that was not the right thing to do? I can't believe I took that advice and ran with it. You know, what kind of a mother would do that to their child? And so, oh, it's such a journey of like grief and processing it all and coming to terms with the journey and trying just to move on and make something positive of it for sure. But yeah, when they said, you know, he is deaf eventually, we mentioned it to a neighbour of ours that, oh, we've just found out Kipp's deaf. So we're just figuring out what that means and what we need to do. And he said, oh, my neighbour down the road's deaf. I'll go and ask him if he can help. So he goes and knocks on this guy's door and they use their phones to write to each other what they wanted to say. And he said, oh, this child up here just found out that he's deaf and do you think you could help this family? And it was this amazing, beautiful deaf man called Nobu that a lot of people in the community and in Perth would know. And he came over to our house with an interpreter, essentially gave us a deaf awareness training in our kitchen and said, whether you have the money to pay me or not, I want to teach your family Auslan and help you and your child. And he came to our house 3 times a week for 6 months. We studied an hour or two every night after the kids went to bed, and our lives just shifted into the most beautiful journey. And oh, the change in our house and in Kipp was so fast and so magic. And oh yeah, it's been so positive from then on.
Oh my God. Wow. 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 That's like that is just so profound. Like the shame stuff, that shame spiral that parents go through. And so often we put it on ourselves, like we should have known, our mama gut should have known. And it's like even me, who has been in this field forever, I was told by a speechie when Frank was 8 weeks old not to sign. And she said it with such conviction. She said it so certainly, said I'd be ruining his life, a waste of time. I left doubting my beliefs, doubting my knowledge. like, so this is the thing, like just communicating to parents out there that if that's how you're feeling, please know that this is not your fault. This is not your fault. It is not your job to go through and be discerning of every single, especially you shouldn't have to do that. You should be able to trust these people. And so, and that's not to say there's not brilliant people out there, but wow, to have to go through that and to just see your little boy suffering so much is so hard and harrowing. And I honestly can't even imagine what that would have been like for you. I know you've spoken about Nobu a lot, and he sounds like he was just that person who pulled you out of the embers and sort of gave you guys life again. And I'm just getting goosebumps thinking about it because I think this is what I love and I sort of push and talk about with families so much is that deaf to deaf connection. And like how when you see it in action, when you actually see a deaf person and a deaf adult with a deaf child and that innate ability to connect, and they just get that little person on a level that we can't as hearing parents, and that's okay. Like that's okay, but it just changes the game. And oh my goodness, like I can't even imagine that moment when you realize, oh wow. And seeing Kipp acquire language to a sign modality and realizing, oh, this isn't a cognitive thing. This isn't a inability to acquire language thing. This is an access thing. And so, um, how has that how has that journey been since then, having Auslan as such a huge part of your life? What are the changes that you've seen in Kipp since engaging with Nobu and starting on this journey?
I guess one of the massive things, and you talk about this, Claire, is just connection to your child. You know, we just spent a year and a half totally disconnected from each other and not able to bond, you know, and we finally had were able to really connect and yeah, like you say, find out what's going on in that mind and was quite quickly, like within 6 months, he started storytelling and like wanting to ask questions and telling us about rockets. And it was the most beautiful thing to witness and to, I think that was a huge part of it was connection to family. And finally, this child was part of the family, you know?
Yeah, and seeing his potential. Like I've seen videos and you've spoken about it in such length before, but he's got such an inquisitive mind. He's got so many questions about the world. And it breaks my heart to think how many deaf kids are out there who can't have those conversations and doesn't have someone who can unpack that with them. And it's such credit to you guys. You sort of smashed the Auslan. You're like, well, we're going to make this our everything. And you almost fast tracked it. I remember when we first met, I think you'd only been on the journey for 6 months, but your Auslan was incredible. And I thought, wow, and I think it's probably because you saw it working and you're like, right, we can hold on to this and like just smash this one out and get him where we need him to be. And recently we did some language assessments on him and he's of age. And
Mm.
I think that is so profound in that way as well, is that you've taken him from this little boy who had no language, who was told, he wasn't deaf and he was in this, a inability to just communicate his basic needs to producing age appropriate language.
Mm.
And I think you and Damien have just done that boy such a service. And I think he's one lucky boy. And I wanted to talk about, I guess, from there, once you found out he was severe to profound, obviously he had hearing aids that they provided him. But you eventually went down the cochlear implant journey. And this is where we resonate so much together because our journeys are so similar with our boys in a lot of ways. Frankie, obviously, we found out Frank was deaf from birth, but just the levels were always fluctuating. We never really knew what he was hearing. And then eventually we've got Frankie. He's got one cochlear implant now. And you went through the stage of doing one and you've just had the second one done. So yeah, talk us through that decision-making process, how that was for you, and I guess, yeah, just the experience.
Yeah, and I guess I don't want to spend so much time talking about our timeline, but that was really complex too. And, when he was first fitted with hearing aids, they ignored an ABR that said he had severe profound loss, and they set his hearing aids to 35 decibels. And surprise, surprise, over 6 months of inconsistent audiograms, couldn't get an accurate audiogram on this child, aided or unaided. And he spent 6 months set at 35 decibels, and his speech didn't progress. And I was doing teacher of the deaf sessions every week. He was going to a deaf play group where they focused on speech, and we just continued our Auslan. And through this time, obviously, we're told by several different people, you don't need to learn sign language. He'll talk, and he didn't talk. And we continued with sign, and again, that timing of Nobu was really good, because when people came to me and said, you don't need sign language, I had so much conviction that yes, we did, and this is the right thing to do. And whether he talks or not, my child's deaf, and I want him to have this language. So we're really lucky that those comments kind of just slid off us. And that was comments from audiologists, teachers of the deaf, speechies, or everyone. So yeah, 6 months of, again, inaccurate audiograms. And at one of the appointments, they said, okay, we couldn't get accurate results in the room. We're just going to leave the settings as they are. We don't think his speech is related to his hearing loss. And go away and come back in 3 months and we'll do another audiogram. And I just cried, and I said, I can't do this anymore. We've been coming here for 6 months and you haven't had one accurate audiogram. He's not talking. We need another opinion here. And so we got booked in the next month with a senior audiologist, couldn't get an accurate audiogram, so sent us to the Perth Children's Hospital, and it took them 5 minutes. They cranked up the volume, played the games. We have a consistent audiogram. This child is severe to profoundly deaf, and his hearing aids went from 35 dB to 85 dB. And it was like he was hearing for the first time. So he's now 4 years old, right? And he's essentially hearing for the first time since he was 18 months, potentially. And yeah, that was a whole nother experience. But yeah, then that cochlear conversation started really quickly, from going from hearing aid set at 35 decibels to, we need to talk about this because he's not going to get access at this level. And I guess I felt for us and for Kipp that this journey had been pretty traumatic, and I just didn't sit right with me to take whatever he had left away to give him two cochlears. I thought it might just be another trauma for him. So I just felt, okay, we'll just go with one, make sure he takes to it. Because that's the other thing, right? Like, some kids just go, you know what, this is not for me. And so I thought, well, let's just do one. Let's try and make that successful, and then we can make a decision down the road about the other. And that's essentially what we did. And so, yeah, a year later, he's had his second cochlear, and he's just flying colours. He's so good. He is so good. He has to take off his first cochlear to practice with his new one, which, as you can imagine, when you've now got access through this, you don't want to take it off and have this strange, incomprehensible sound coming through the other. But he does. He takes it off. He sits there for 15 minutes. I'll read him a story. Then he gets to put it back on, and he's just so compliant. He's got a beautiful temperament, which we're really lucky. We haven't faced a lot of challenges that other people have faced in those kind of areas. Like, he's happy to wear them all day. But yeah, I feel now like we've made the right decision, and he's got both cochlears and he's thriving. Yeah.
Oh, that's like such a good news story. And so similar to Frankie as well. Like, we're looking at potentially getting a second one as he started. And it's funny, both our boys did this. And I remember you telling me Kipp did this, and I thought, oh, how funny. And now Frank's doing it, where they take the hearing aid out and they're like, it's not working. And you're like, no, it's on. It's working. The CI is just like a supercharged version of that. So they just start to go. And Frankie literally yesterday said, I want to. So it's funny how they come to it in their own way. And I think our boys, they obviously just want all the access they can get. And we've both been incredibly lucky with the way they've taken to their CIs because, as you said, it's just not that way. I'm with a lot of clients who've got these brilliant little kids, but there's a sensory thing, or they've been sick for a really long time, or the CI just isn't doing what it should be doing. And so these children have rejected the devices, and the parents aren't signing because they didn't know that that was actually what an option.
Yeah.
So I think you've just given him absolutely everything to thrive. And which brings us to your latest battle that you've sort of been having. And this is sort of the double-edged sword we find, right? Like you've got your Auslan kid. We've both got L1 kids. So Auslan's their first language, but then they've obviously got this now sound input coming in. So their speech is now developing. And now that they're making more sense to people, all of a sudden that leads people to believe they no longer need Auslan access. And this is like one of the biggest myths we need to debunk is that a deaf child speaking doesn't mean they're any less deaf, doesn't mean they need any less Auslan access, particularly if that's been their first language for so long and will continue to be their first language. And so I think this is sort of the battle you've had. You had, without obviously mentioning any names in specifically, but with your first, he's in school now, and with your first experience with school, it didn't go the way you'd hoped, and you've had a really harrowing advocacy journey and just having people tell you what your child needs instead of you knowing what your child needs. And do you feel comfortable to talk a little bit about the school advocacy journey and where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as much as it sucks, it is good for people to know coming into school kind of a little bit about what to expect, because I definitely had rose tinted glasses. I thought, oh, he enters the school system and then they look after them. Like, this is going to be so nice. And it's just, that's not what happens at all. And I guess you have to come to terms with the fact that you are going to have to advocate for the rest of this journey, and that's your reality, and that's okay. You just have to accept it and find ways of coping through that. Yeah, we had a really awful intro to school. A principal that knew nothing about deaf people, deaf education, deaf children, deaf culture, nothing. He's the first deaf person he'd ever met, but he was not responsive to learning anything about deaf education and deaf children and deafness itself. And so that was really hard because you're trying to advocate for your child and give them information to support the decision making, and you're just hitting a brick wall. And I think so many people found that in different areas, that how do you advocate when someone's not responsive to the information? And he'd make comments like, well, I've never seen Kipp sign in class. Like, why does he need an Auslan support in there? And it's like, because no one else in that room uses Auslan. So why? He's not going to try and communicate in a language that no one else knows. Essentially, he was trying to call my bluff. Like, this child doesn't need Auslan. You're full of it, And that was so hard. And because Kipp's speech is then starting to develop. So, yes, exactly like you're saying, Claire, that people then, well, he's hearing now, he's speaking, so why does he need Auslan? And we've since changed schools, and again, I went in very optimistic. And I had reports from yourself and from another local teacher of the deaf to say his comprehension of spoken language is in the 6th percentile. He's not, when we're giving him anything out of context or a new concept, he can't process it. He's not understanding it. And so he needs Auslan. If he's going to have access to the curriculum and learn, he needs Auslan to do that. And his speech was amazing. His speech is sitting up almost in the age-appropriate range. And so that's obviously really hard for people that don't know anything about deafness to really take that information in and apply that properly. And so they said, we're not going to provide him with support in the room. We'll give him an EA 3 days a week, and that's it. And so I had to go into battle again, and I was really sad about that. But I was fired up, and I had all my information, and I really got everything into really worked out, and I now felt like I could articulate a lot better what I needed to in these meetings. And so, we went to the regional operations manager and didn't get the result we needed. So then we went above her to her manager and didn't get the results we needed. And we ended up at the Governor General's office, and we ended up with the result. We've got full-time funding for our child to go into school, and now there's a battle of finding someone, which is another thing. But I came back, I got called by this regional manager to say, hey, your funding's gone from the lowest level to the highest level, and now he'll get someone full-time. And I cried, and I was really happy about that. But then I kind of stopped and I said, shame on you and your department for not supporting me through this. I should not have had to have this conversation at the Governor General's level as a parent of the child. I said, you guys are in these positions as the advocates for our children and you're not doing anything. And that really, shame on you for that, So yeah, I think that's such a hard part of the journey, is that you keep finding that these people you thought would be on your team are just not advocating for our children. And so all of that burden sits on your shoulders, and that's our reality, and that's a really sad reality.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you articulated that so well. And I think it is, as much as we don't want to put a negative connotation or a cynicism around this, it is the reality for us. And I think this is why I'm so strong in my mission to build parent advocates, because you can't avoid it. We can't just avoid it. And if we don't, our kids miss out. No one is more invested in our kids than us
Yeah.
and other parents. Like, this is my big thing. I'm like, we need to be getting together and having these conversations and actually leaning on each other, because we're all in it together. We all care about each other's kids because we all want the same outcome for our kids. And I think you are such a strong advocate now because you've had to be. You've learnt the ropes. You know what you need to do now, but you shouldn't have to. And I think that's the biggest thing that's so exhausting for families, is this just fatigue of advocacy. And it's like, why am I fighting for my child to just have basic access as his human right? Like, why is this such an impossible thing for people to understand? And I feel this is a very similar conversation in the NDIS world as well. And it's just devastating that this is our life. But I think all we can do is equip ourselves and become really strong, proactive advocates, and together, if we do that, we shift shift the narrative, move that needle. And you are someone that I think is such a leader in that space, even if you don't see it, because you have done the work to get to a point where you are making change for Kipp, and to get that full-time funding and to have that is incredible. And I do want to just say, because I know a lot of people listen to this podcast, that right now, as this is being recorded, Sarah is looking for a full-time interpreter for Kipp in Esperance. So if you're looking for a sea change, you're not tied down, and you want to just come over to Esperance, it's a bloody beautiful town. And I'll put if you don't mind I'll put your socials down in the show notes so you can follow Sarah and Kipp's journey, and also look at where they live. Because, guys, if I wasn't, I didn't have a mortgage over here, I'd probably be over there myself. So getting here, this little boy is brilliant. You will not ever regret supporting him. He is just honestly smashing goals. And so I think, yeah, if you are an educational interpreter out there looking for a sea change, get in contact with myself or Sarah, because he deserves the best of the best. Look, we're going to wrap up, but I did want to ask you one more question. And it's sort of the question I ask everyone at the end, because I think, everyone has such unique advice. And it's just, if we look at parents who may have just found out that their little baby is deaf, or just parents on the journey right now who are just feeling overwhelmed, fatigued, unsure, guilty, grieving, whatever the feeling might be right now, what is just some advice that you've learned, and I guess you want to provide to these families around the journey, that might be able to help them or give them a bit of comfort?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much you could say, isn't there? And you just wish you could give all this information that you have now to someone starting out. Oh. I think just try and simplify things, break it down into bite-sized pieces, and you can do it. You know that you think you've just found out your child's deaf, you're learning the language of audiology, which is a whole language. You're learning the language of NDIS, there's a whole nother language. And now you're going to all these appointments. You've got speech appointments, you've got audiology appointments, you've got whatever else is going on. And then someone says, you should learn Auslan. And you just think, nah, that'll sink the boat. It won't. It will make your boat float. And just take off a bite-sized piece. So just go, okay, let's learn colours. You know, just take off a bite-sized piece and see where it takes you. And I reckon 99% of people end up just loving the language, learning it, continuing to learn it. And yeah, there's nothing better than engaging with the deaf community and giving your child access to that community through language. So just break it down. Doing something is better than nothing. So just do something.
I love that. I love it. And it's like imperfect action, you know, like it doesn't have to be perfect. None of us has to be, none of us are perfect. Like
Exactly.
we're all just like surviving and just wanting to give our kids everything. And I think that sense of community as well, I'll mention, like I find you need to connect with people, just find parents, find people who you can talk to about what you're going through, who get it, because we know the amount of times I've spoken to people who aren't doing this and living this life right now and are some of the most wonderful people I know, but they just don't get it. And as much as they wish they did, they don't. And so sometimes you'll get those throwaway comments like, oh, they'll be fine. You're worrying too much. They're resilient. Kids are resilient, all that stuff, which is all well intended, but it's not that easy for us. And I think when you find people who you don't have to justify your feelings and emotions to, and I just want to say, I'm probably going to embarrass you now, but Sarah, you are one of those people definitely for me. And I don't get a lot of people in what I do, the nature of my work, I don't get to be just a parent very often. And it's a really hard line for me. So I think I've been really lucky with you. I've got a very small circle of people that I would say I can be myself. I can talk about the journey as a parent, and I'm not going to have that dissected. I'm not going to have that, you know, judged. And I just want to thank you for being that person for me. And for, I know so many other people. You are so active in our RB club as well. You're just such a beautiful addition to that space, and you're supporting people as well. So thank you for all the work that you do, because it really does matter and it is profound. And that little boy is one lucky lad, I'll tell you, and he's just going to smash goals, and I can't wait to see what he does. So thank you so much for joining me. You're amazing. And just keep
Yeah,
going.
right back at you. It's connecting with you in our journey was just the best thing we could have ever done, and it just changed our trajectory, and we're forever grateful. And every person that you can connect with and shift the narrative is just changing the world for all of our kids. And I guess, yeah, from the whole community, we're just so appreciative of what you're doing. Yeah.
Thank you, lovely. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone.